Hey, good morning, everyone. We get started in 1 minute, give some people time to hop in. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to our monthly coffee chat. Thank you for starting your day with us. My name is Rachel Zamsky, and I'm the marketing specialist here at Aqueduct Technologies. I do just want to note that today's call is being recorded. We want to keep this interactive, so if at any point you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the chat or Q&A box, and we'll be sure to get those answered for you. I hope everyone has their coffee today. I'm bringing in fall a little bit early here with my hot coffee. So, without further ado, Rick, the floor is yours if you'd like to introduce yourself and our special guest for today.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Of course, I am Rick Beaupre. I am a cybersecurity architect with Aqueduct, and I host this monthly coffee chat here. And this month, I am joined by Mike Gioia, who is the CISO at Babson College. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about AI, pros and cons of AI and public versus private. And there's been a lot of excitement around AI recently. One of the things that, ramping up onto this, I discovered AI has been around for a long time in various forms. I've seen it as far back as the 50s and 60s with, different things that are going on. And we're seeing this proliferation now because of AI being more public, and now we're seeing these folks kind of using it like advanced search engines in some ways and, other things to do uh, tasks that were, normally monotonous and those kinds of things. Um, you know, Typically, AI we find is, we're using it for problem solving and, these, creativities and autonomy things that are coming up. And in the education space, I see AI kind of taking the biggest leap from there. You kind of feel the same way with that?
I think so. But I also think it depends on the institution.
Mhm.
So here at Babson, we're very heavy adopting, in the process of adopting Gen AI. It's being led by my boss, the CIO. Also, we have a couple professors on the academic space leading it, the charge here at Babson. So we kind of have this mindset of all in on AI, and all the way up to our presidential leadership that has been embracing and supporting it. So, but I think in higher ed, we typically don't have the manpower or resources that other organizations and other verticals do. So anything that can kind of help us streamline things and make things more efficient, we usually try to adopt relatively quickly.
Yeah, that's the great thing about generative AI, right? So there's a lot of AI different models. I think the last time I looked, there was like 7 or 10 different classifications of models
Yeah.
with research and everything. But generative AI seems to be the most flexible and the most ambidextrous when we're trying to, fill out what we're trying to do from a creativity space from there.
Right.
I've seen things where folks, get a little nervous about the ethics of it or get nervous about the human-like thinking of it. And I think, folks need to understand where they are in those classifications and where they do those, and how they align, from that, and that a lot of it isn't making it to the generative AI space. Although, you and I have had this discussion before where, generative AI, public versus private, we have to be careful of putting intellectual property in a private space.
Right. Yeah. And so for us here at Babson, kind of the first thing we did is we created a policy, mostly around data protections for generative AI. That's actually the name of our policy. And it's supported by our data classification and handling policy. So we've past couple of years, we've been educating our users to how to appropriately handle data, especially at the sensitivity level. And now we added this additional policy, with the handling with Gen AI to help them guide what they should be putting into an open AI, what is open generative AI, what is closed generative AI, and then to top that off, we're following the EU AI Act or regulation. I'm not sure if they're calling it an act or regulation, and that gives kind of a pyramid tier of based on risk on what you should or shouldn't be putting in certain Gen AI models. So there's like unacceptable risk, which is like facial recognition and very serious like personnel records and things that are regulated. You really shouldn't be putting that into Gen AI. And then it tiers down to high, limited, and minimal. So that's kind of what we're doing to try to educate our users on what they should or shouldn't put in to Gen AI. And that's kind of for us, that was the foundational thing to start out once we started embracing Gen AI.
Yeah, and let's kind of just recap for some of the public ones, we have OpenAI's Chat GPT, we have the Microsoft Copilot, which is an asterisk because there's a private version as well. We have the Google Gemini, my favorite Midjourney. I like what that can do. And then we have the private closed systems, which are they can include some things like Microsoft's Copilot Studio, but a lot of times they're very limited on what they can reach out to the cloud for. And one of the things I always talk to my customers about, or just people in general as I consult, is be very careful of putting that intellectual property into a public AI because you lose control of it. Things like if you want to reformulate an Excel spreadsheet that has, employee data, that's now public. If you have intellectual property, you're building a widget that is, very limited. If you put that source code in a public AI, it's now available.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's for everyone's consumption at that point. And especially the more people adopt Gen AI just in their daily lives, the more risk there is if you put something that you shouldn't out there in the open Gen AIs.
Yeah, and I have seen a lot of guidance from NIST. Nothing's like, with NIST, there's still the guidance of it, with the risk framework. ISO just came out with one to,
Right.
42,001 to kind of control what you can do on the AI. And a lot of it is still all guardrails, right? So,
Right.
I think EU Act is probably the strongest, just to make sure you're protecting the privacy of information, but it is starting to generate more guidance or guardrails because of what it can do, right? We have plugins now of Humanizer. We have plugins now where you can pretty much generate any image, voice manipulation, video manipulation, that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just blowing up. I think we actually have 12 to 14 different Gen AI tools approved for usage on campus, in using in classrooms and the professors can use. And what we're trying to figure out now is how do we vet that when new tools come in and get an understanding on what is being used across our environment. And is it going to be open? Is it going to be a closed system? So those are all like new things we need to approach. I don't necessarily know if they're new that we have to create a whole new process. I think it's kind of similar to other things just based on like third-party risk management and things like that, but it's educating the users, because typically for purchasing an application or something that's coming through procurement, usually the staff side of the house, but now we have like faculty that's out there testing new things and like, oh, this is really cool and it's a Gen AI tool and I want to use it in my class. And now they have to kind of go through this process that maybe they haven't seen before when it comes to the review for this risk and security of the data that they're going to use.
Yeah, and that's very forthright in the thinking, because with, not only do you have the security concerns, right, but you have the ethical concerns, you have, again, I keep pushing on the intellectual property, you have some dependencies in there, so really, I commend you guys for, being ahead of that in that space, because I see, some businesses just rolling it out. Hey, I'm gonna buy XYZ security product because it has AI,
Right.
in
Yeah.
it without doing the due diligence of what that particularly means, right? A
Yeah.
lot of
And
like,
it's interesting too in security, like people, I mean, it's all we're talking about. Like I think in every IT conference and IT call, it's Gen AI, Gen AI. And then I always get the question, it's like, how nervous are you about it? And I'm typically my response is not that nervous about it, because really in security, we've been using AI for a couple decades, maybe, or
Mhm.
at least a decade. Because for us, the standard practice was to ingest all your logs, your data when you're monitoring for security threats, and analyze that. And if you have a security department like mine, of team of three, and we're getting thousands of logs and alerts a day, we need computers to help us do that. And it was typically using large language models and traditional AI to monitor that and filter out what we needed.
That is a good point, because a lot of people, AI is so new, but it's not, right? We've been using
Yep.
machine learning, we've been using behavior anomaly tools
Right.
for
Yep.
decades, right? And how that, you know, kind of works, and understanding, even traffic patterns with flows. If something's anomalous, what does that mean? And investigate it. But with the proliferation of the public AIs, and some of them are glorified search engines, and some of them are really great tools.
Right.
And some can be really invasive. You just have to be very careful on the tool. And again, I applaud Babson for the due diligence. And if anything from this coffee chat we could drive today is, do your due diligence. Really take your time with that tool and what it means to your business. What can you do with it? What is the output's going to be? And then, I hate using the term control, but again, you have to, in this instance, is how much control do you have of the input and output of the data? Because it's really important for your business to not get yourself in a bind because there's ethical concerns, because there's intellectual property that's been put in there, or somebody just, did something nefarious. One of the things in security, we always talk about keeping the honest people honest, right? It's
Right.
really important what we do. And a lot of folks don't understand the power of the tool, and really kind of need, guardrails around it to help guide us on those.
Right. Yeah. It's the back to the whole trust but verify, which we find ourselves doing a lot, is trust that what you're looking at, they're going to do the honest thing, but you need to verify just to make sure, because it's not so much that they're dishonest, but they just maybe have configured something inappropriately or wrong, and it turns out to be a problem. And yeah, really due diligence is the main thing, and it doesn't have to be that complicated of due diligence or extensive. Really, when it came to getting new applications or bringing in new vendors with their applications for us, we mainly ask 4 questions about Gen AI.
Mhm.
One, are you using it? Two, what type of data are you feeding into your models? What type of model is it? Is it open or close? And is it using it to train? And then also, if you have an ethical standard that you've
Mhm.
implemented with it, and really from there, I feel like you can get enough information to understand the risk of this tool that's leveraging Gen AI. And also, I've been surprised about the amount of tools that are starting to leverage it. Just basic financial tools that we may use at the staff level that are leveraging Gen AI to help. So it's just, that's been a little bit what I would say has been surprising is, yes, there's rapid adoption, but we'll ask and be like, there's really no need to use Gen AI with this tool that we're trying to acquire. And then you ask them and they're like, oh yeah, we're absolutely using it.
Well, and I think I could sense your stress level is down, because, as you correctly said in the beginning, is you had a policy, so everybody knew the map and the rules of what was going to happen. And the second thing is the due diligence of following a compliance guideline. So whether you follow the EU Act or NIST, guidelines, or even the ISO, depending on what's right for your business, follow one of them.
Right.
And, and again, I'm with you. I think the EU one is probably the strongest one out there right now. It's well thought out. And, I think it allows you to understand what you're ingesting and what you're exporting, from that.
And it brings it to a risk perspective, I think, easier, especially with its pyramid, right? So, and it helps to align a little better with hopefully a data classification policy that an organization has, because typically it's like restricted or regulated, high, medium, low, or public, right? And so, yeah, that's kind of why. Plus, when we started adopting it, NIST hadn't really put out anything, and there wasn't an ISO yet. The AI Act was the kind of the only one out there.
Yeah, I just saw that one was, just early 24,
Yeah.
and I think NIST just finally adopted, and I don't think it's fully vetted yet, but at least they have it out there in a draft form and all that. I wanted to remind folks that we have a Q&A on here. If you have any questions on anything we're talking about, feel free to throw something in the Q&A, and we'll address those questions as they come up. I want to talk to you just real quickly about your data classification. I really push that hard with customers because I think it's important to understand, the 4 basic classification levels, and anything you add on top of it just makes it so much easier. When you guys started your data classification project, did you find it arduous? What was that whole process like for you?
So I think the easy part was actually creating the policy, right? And establishing your levels of classification. We have a 4-level classification. Some people have 3. I don't think you want to get too much more than 4, because then it gets confusing for your users.
Yep.
I think what is a constant effort is discovering, classifying, and then educating the users that this type of data you need to handle a certain way. I feel like we're constantly referring people to the policy. To be like, hey, we discovered you have this data in your email. Please review the policy. I think we have our users actually acknowledge the policy twice a year through different other required training that they have to do. If it's annual InfoSec training or annual, for us, conflict of interest is something that we have. We make sure that we have certain policies like acceptable use and data classification. Part of that they have to acknowledge that they've read it and understand it.
Yeah, the key I get from everything that you've talked about with classification, with AI, is the simplicity of it, right? And having a plan, keeping the data classification to 3 or 4. I've seen some people really overdo it. Like you said, it gets really confusing to the customer, but to the end users. But if you have it where you can at least have 3 or 4 classifications, then have an AI adoptive policy on it, I think, it really takes those stress levels down from a public perspective. From a private perspective, that allows you the same tools from there, and then you can expand it of what's in there as far as PII or any of the information that you want to keep, private to the Babson ecosystem.
Yeah, that's correct.
I did get a question up here, and I think it's going to be a good one. We can kind of segue into this. And the question is, where is the best place to start when beginning to adopt Gen AI in an organization?
The best place to start, I would say, is, I guess, leadership is kind of where we started, but we had a couple champions. So it's really identifying the use or a usage of it in your organization, and what that is. So kind of defining the scope of how it will improve your organization, and then start putting in, make sure as you start to adopt it, you have the guardrails in place already. And that's getting a policy on how it should be used at your organization. Not so much, specific what tools, but really just the process of using it. Like you should or shouldn't put in certain types of data. those type of things. And C, also determine if open is okay for you, or if you need some type of closed system, because you are going to be putting in potentially intellectual property or business secrets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point, because I think a lot of people go tool first. And is it the right tool, right? I've
Right.
seen that before. And I don't want to name any specific tools, but they go in and they're like, oh, this is so much harder than I thought. And again, back to your point, having those things set up is perfect. I got another one for you. So this is great about the interactive. Um, let's see. Have you been involved or asked to monitor any faculty efforts with AI or chatbots in a way to interact with course content?
No, we don't get into the faculty's business for the most part.
Yeah.
This is why we put out the policy when we did. I mean, and we've gone to we've provided actual classes to faculty during like the startup semester on Gen AI and its usage, but we don't want to really limit. Right, we try to keep that academic freedom, and that's the fine line we always walk in higher ed, is maintaining that academic freedom, but also maintaining good security. So in fact, we're actually assisting faculty to develop a math chatbot, like a math tutor bot, using AI. So we've actually, when they come to us, we're actually supporting their efforts. But we're not monitoring. I'm not in the security world monitoring their usage. We have the policy in place. We tell them, you shouldn't be putting in sensitive data. But again, it gets back into the risk. Honestly, most faculty aren't handling what we define or classify as our regulated or restricted data. Most of the stuff that they have that they're concerned about is maybe their personal research or their IP when it comes to their class materials and things like that. So it's kind of on them to keep it private or not, but we're here to help as well.
Yeah, that's amazing, because again, I think when they realize the information they have, they don't want to be giving it out. And your education internally to the users is very powerful. And if anything, we can drive home that, right? Education for the users to understand. And I think, that helps not create all this confusion. It helps create, it kind of tampers down the angst of it. And I've seen, and the reason we're talking today, I've seen higher ed do a better job with it than I have seen, other entities try and do it. Like, healthcare is very limited on what they can do. I've seen it in the research realm and that kind of stuff, but so much in the day-to-day, I don't see it a lot in there. It's very locked down. But with education, it's embracing it. But again, having the right policy and the right education for your users in place first before you go and do it.
And I'm teaching a cybersecurity class this fall here at Babson. And I have a little statement in my syllabus that says, we encourage you to use it, but ethically. And that's a big thing I press in my class, is that how the ethical aspects of cybersecurity and how that trickles down straight into the Gen AI. I've heard, this wasn't at Babson, but I was at a conference and someone mentioned, cheating and academic integrity with the students, and they said there's a responsibility on the faculty to make their courses and their curriculum a bit more challenging, to where it isn't easy to have a chat bot, because really, are you doing a service on educating a student if they can just go to the web and have a robot, I call them the robots, but have Gen AI give them the information and the answers, as opposed to them learning and discovering and doing research in the class. So there's a little bit of a balance there, and maybe a little bit of a change in mentality with professors on how they teach their classes.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, like, you and I deal with it a lot, so you can kind of tell when somebody's using, a chat output. You're like, okay, that's, it's pretty generic.
Yeah, and also, like, you have two students that submit something that has the same kind of theme and same kind of structure
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
response, you're like, okay, that this was written by a robot.
Mm.
Yeah.
If it starts with a sentence in today's digital landscape,
Yeah, yeah,
most likely it came from, you know, an AI tool,
yeah.
from that. One of the things I wanted to just kind of just talk back about is the risk of over reliance on AI. Are you seeing that in the education space at all now? I have seen it in some verticals in there. I just wanted to get your take on, the over reliance of it.
I haven't seen that. For us, it's more of outside of IT is people understanding how they can use it, and and more of trying to get that stronger adoption. We've seen people say like, "Oh, I don't use it because I don't really understand it," and it's like, we sit down with them and like, look, you just have to ask it a simple question, and then kind of tease into that if it's not giving you exactly what you want. But I think we'll start to see, just like when Wikipedia came out, right?
Hmm.
Like it's going to take a little bit. What was there, a couple of years when Wikipedia came out, that everyone's like, oh, this is a source to source things, and it's like, well, wait a minute, like anyone can write anything in Wikipedia, just like Gen AI can hallucinate and have false information because it's just inputting a ton of data from across the internet. So I think in the initial steps, we'll see maybe a little bit of over reliance, but then we'll start getting the mindset that like, okay, like again, get back to trust, but verify the inputs that we're getting from this.
I would assume that there'll be a course coming with Babson ethics in AI or AI prompt engineering, those kinds of things, because
Yeah.
it's here to stay, right?
Yeah.
It's here to stay. It's gonna get better. I do think the private systems are gonna catch up pretty fast. You got, a lot of vendors out there like Intel, NVIDIA
Right.
is building some amazing pieces of equipment to generate these large language models that we need, and it could take multiple models, right? I've seen tools out there. When I was at Cisco Live earlier this year, I saw one of the Cisco NVIDIA switches that can move terabytes of data, which is what you need for a large language model, where you don't wind up stripping it out or causing issues with it.
Yeah. And I just talked to a startup company that's developing tier one SOC analysts that are just AI bots. They're calling them analyst bots. And
That's amazing.
so
Yeah.
they're to replace that to kind of tier one. And for me, that's exciting because I have a team of 3 and I look for outside support to handle my tier one kind of monitoring of my systems. And I just kind of want to jump back to the class. I would say that here at Babson, just last semester, I think we had 20 or 25 professors using Gen AI in their curriculum. And that's only increased. And then we're also providing, we're calling them scholarships, but we're giving students the ability to access open AI in a closed space to help develop startup tools. Because we're real big on entrepreneurship here. So we try to educate the students how to create startup companies. So that's kind of some of the adoption that we're having already here at the college.
That's amazing. So that's all in a lab space where they can kind of understand it and get really comfortable with it and then build tools from it.
Right.
And that's really going to help them. Like you said, and entrepreneurial, those plugins are really going to help the market, because I have been working with a lot of plugins. Some are amazing and some are what is,
Need a little bit more work.
yeah. But again, I'm just glad they're out there, right? These entrepreneurs pushing that, or just coming up with, simple task things to very, complex stuff, like, you're seeing the evolution of Dolly, what it can do with graphics, and you just, it's just amazing. So the entrepreneurial spirit of Babson is welcome, especially in our space, right, where we deal
Right.
with this stuff almost every day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what the students start developing and releasing.
Yeah, and I have seen some security tools now where they're becoming agentless, where it can go out and understand what your topology looks like, what your environment looks like, and then map it for you, and then let you know if there's anomalies and those kinds of things. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but I get where they're coming, from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I again use it. I would say, and this is my opinion, security has always been an early adopter of, especially around the AI, right? Using the large language models. So, I see us adopting it and doing some really neat things in the cybersecurity space to help our efforts and the work that we do. So it's not so much we're scared. I don't believe any of us will be scared of it. I think us will embrace it. And I know I'm excited to see what's developed from it, just from a security perspective, and security support.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second, because when I first personally started working with Gen AI, and dude, I was all for it. I thought it was great. I liked what it could do for our industry. I'm security centric, and I thought that this was a perfect tool. And then I start coming across folks in my space that there was a lot of trepidation. There was a lot of oh, I'm gonna lock down my whole system, and I was like, well, am I wrong for embracing this, as much as it was? And,
Yeah.
it made me take a step back.
Yeah. I mean, for a minute, but it's just gonna, I think I was a little bit like that too, but then it's like, look, this is coming here to stay. And actually it's going to help support security efforts, because not so much with the tools that it develops, but really right now, the only way to combat what we see when it comes to the Gen AI and what that looks like on a malicious sphere and malicious landscape, it gets us just reinforcing things like zero trust. Only allow what you need it to do, a device to do, keeping it pretty restricted and locked down, focusing on the risk about it. So it's just kind of embracing some more of those advanced, like zero trust has been around what, 5, 6, 7 years now. And it's an effort, but just like data discovery classification and DLP, right? That's been around for a decade plus, and it's still difficult, but these tools are going to help us do that better. And it also is going to help us get the support we need from leadership to be like, look, if you want to protect against this, we need to do this effort.
Yeah, you bring up a good point too. One of the things that when you were talking about earlier about the education stuff you do with your staff and all of that, it takes us from, the bad guys behind the computer. It brings us to business enablers, right? And helping them understand, what we're doing. And I'm seeing that a big shift of that now, both with CISOs, but even down to, the help desk and all that stuff. It's now, technology is moving so fast that educating the users is amazing, right? And that's really helping, align IT with the business. And I've seen that whole shift the last year, especially. And I think AI is going to push that even faster, where, now we in IT are going to be the enablers of this technology going forward. And that's really going to, whether you're in business, education, healthcare, it's going to be incumbent on us to educate our users and be at the forefront of that.
Yeah. And I'd like to just kind of focus in on the key word you use there as enablement. And I think IT as a whole needs to shift from a service provider for companies and organizations to a service enabler. And is doing things to enable the users to do their job better. And if we do that with security in mind, we do that in a more secure manner and less risk manner, and everything hopefully operates more efficiently. And then it helps in the long run because the users are educated and they can kind of help themselves and do their job more effectively.
Yeah, because in the world of digital transformation, if you're not educating your users and you're not being an enabler, you're not doing a digital transformation.
Right.
And that's, I see these people, I'm going to do a digital transformation project. I'm putting all this new technology in. Okay.
Cool. How does that help me?
Yeah. But again, the user education space is really taken off, and AI has helped leading that. And I'm all for that from there. Let's see. One last thing here, just real quick. Any lessons learned, best practices you've come across?
Um, best lessons learned. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's surprising how many companies and services are already using Gen AI in their tools. And even if the tool or service doesn't sound like it would be using it, it's in there. It could potentially be in there. And it was asking the right questions. So I think that was one lesson learned. I think that's all I have right now. It's still just very new, and we're just kind of discovering stuff. And I think we made the right decision on getting a policy out early, adopting like the EU AI regulation, which I think came out. Honestly, I think that's been out for. I know there's a Medium article about it that's dated like September 2021.
Yeah.
So adopting some type of guardrail framework to help you through this, I think is kind of the best lesson. I wouldn't say it's a lesson learned for us. We just did the right thing up front. But I think that's good for people to understand that that's going to help you guide you through this process.
Yeah, one of my takeaways you said earlier was the due diligence of asking your vendors, well, are they using AI and what are they using it for, right? Those four basic questions. I think it's incumbent on everybody to ask that, because as you get into data classification projects, if you haven't done it yet, you're going to do it. That has to be incorporated in it. And if your vendors are using it and you're not aware of it, that's going to create a little bit of issues for you. So again, take Mike's word here and do your due diligence and ask who's using it and what are they using it for from that. Anything else you want to add as we wrap up here, Mike?
No, I don't think so. One more thing too about the due diligence is make sure you understand what data you as an organization are going to be sending, or the service or tool is going to be leveraging with that, and so you can make them a better risk decision on it if they do end up using Gen AI.
That's amazing. So what I'm gonna, one of the things for folks that are on this and maybe watching it later, we're gonna post links to the regulations that we talked about today. I do have a website that talks about best practices. Do you have any resources folks can use that you rely on that you want to share?
You know, most higher ed institutions, and not mine, we have some legal aspects, but especially the state schools, all their policies and procedures are typically publicly posted. So you can see kind of how, from a higher ed's perspective, how they're handling it from a policy perspective. And then just doing the Google searches or ask an open Gen AI about, can you summarize the EU AI Act, or what's the best practices gleaned from this? And it gives you a lot of information back to kind of help you through this process.
Yeah, that using the tools that help guide you.
A secret is our policy on the data protection of Gen AI. We actually use Gen AI to generate that policy for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any events coming up that you're going to attend with for AI?
Not specific to AI, but I do have some security conferences, and right now all those security conferences and dinners and stuff that I'm attending is all about Gen AI. I will be attending the Aqueduct security conference in October, the day conference for Awareness Month. But that's it. It's just in everything right now, so nothing really specific.
Yeah, and that's all about governance and just again, identifying where that data is I just feel we're getting pushed down more and more from regulators, but also from, ethics and us being good stewards with the data, is understanding what data we have, where it sits, what it's doing, and how can we protect it.
Yeah.
I think people are starting to understand that more, which is great, because now more than ever we have a tremendous amount of data sources,
Yeah.
from there. Let's see if I have any more questions as we wrap up. It looks like we got them from here. All right, let's kind of wrap up Mike, it's been great chatting with you on this. Can you tell folks where they can find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best. I don't have any other social media. I guess maybe that's because I'm a security guy. But feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. I believe I'm the only Michael Gioia as a CISO on there. So, and if you have any more questions, feel free to send me a chat through LinkedIn as well.
And they got to get your book. Your book is amazing.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I keep forgetting I wrote a book. So yeah, security risk management. And it's talking about what we call the firefighter paradox. It's on Amazon if you want to search that. And my co-author, he has a profile on there. It pops up. His name is Jim Seaman. Yeah, if you want to take a look at it, yeah, it's a pretty good book.
Yeah, it was amazing reading it, and then meeting you and working with you. It was awesome. And and again, this call to action here is our cybersecurity summit is going to be on October 10th. You can find registration at cybersummit.aqueducttech.com, or you can go to our LinkedIn page as well and find a link there from there. And again, I'm always on LinkedIn, or you guys can find me, wherever. And again, Mike, thank you so much for joining me today on the coffee chat. It was great talking about all of this stuff, and I commend all your efforts for what you guys are doing. I think you're doing it right, and so glad you were able to join me.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate being here. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, just what he said. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. Don't worry, you guys don't have to memorize any of those links. I'm going to send over an email after this call with the recording and all of the resources they mentioned, and also a link to the registration page if you would like to join that event. The summit is October 10th, like Rick was mentioning, and we're really excited about this one. It's our second annual one. So we did one last year, and it was a great success, and we had such a great time, and I feel like people just came away with so many great insights. So we're doing another one this year. So Mike will be there, Rick will be there. You'll be able to ask some questions in person. Definitely, ask questions about AI when you're there. I know it's not like we're covering compliance, but we can kind of cover all security issues that you're curious about as well. So it's going to be a really great event. I'll send that link over. There's more details. We have our big keynote speaker this year, which is going to be great. So you'll get more details on her if you go to the page. So thank you for mentioning it, Mike, and for mentioning it, Rick. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll talk to everybody later. Let me know if you have any questions after this call. I will get those questions over to Rick and Mike for you. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.